food that you feed him.
Clerk will call the roll.
Glenn Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Andy H. Wynn, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation today will be delivered by Pastor Fred Gonzalez from the Lake Country Christian Church. Appreciate you coming out today. After the invocation, please remain standing for the pledge.
I'd like to read you a passage out of Psalms 94. It says, "Blessed is the man whom you instruct, O Lord, and teach out of your law, that you may give him rest in these days of adversity." So let us pray. Father, today is surely the day that you have made, and we shall rejoice and be glad in it, O Father. We have much to be grateful for, Father. We just thank you that you have appointed these leaders over us, dear Father. We ask that you would grant them all knowledge and all wisdom to instruct the people, dear Father. We know that you are of righteousness and you are of truthfulness, dear Father, and we know that your word will come forth, and we just give you honor and glory in these courts today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Honor. Members of the court, we have several announcements as it relates to the agenda. Today we're going to have a work session. The work session is going to be conducted after we come back from closed session. Initially we were going to have the work session in 503, but we're going to go ahead and move it back into the Commissioner's courtroom. So the work session will be held here in the courtroom today. As it relates to that work session, the session is going to deal with the proposed bond package from the hospital district. And under the administrator section, item A1, that item has been placed on there under the action agenda so that at the conclusion of the work session that we're going to be seeking direction from the court, and so we have it agendized as an action item for the court. This is not to call the election. This is simply to ask that we move forward with the planning process. Also under the administrator section, item A2, which is action concerning the Strategic Transportation Enhancement Program, that particular item will be also considered after closed session. Members of the court, we could go to purchasing. This will be item 8G1. This is bid number 2015-141, which is the sale of recycled paper. There's revised court communication in your red folder this morning as it relates to that particular item. And then finally, members of the court, just like to make you aware that that the PEBC will be meeting on Wednesday at 2 o'clock in Arlington. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Court members, you have before you the minutes of our regular meeting of May the 19th.
Move for approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. We have the honor today of being able to recognize the Fort Worth Independent School District student nominees for the Score a Goal in the Classroom Walter Dansby Tower Achievement Award. And I believe that Barry Smith, the director of the Fort Worth ISD's attendance division, is here to introduce our nominees this year, and I will come down and help with the presentation of the medals.
Thank you. First of all, good morning to Judge Whitley, to our esteemed county commissioners. First of all, I want to thank you for this opportunity to recognize our young people. As you know, each year a select group of students are recognized. These students have had truancy issues that were so severe that they were on the verge of being cited for failure to attend school. They have since overcome their challenges. In 2004, Mr. Ernie Horn, along with the Score a Goal in the Classroom program, created the Walter Dansby Tower Achievement Award as a means of spotlighting the perseverance of these students. Each traditional high school submits the name of a student who has overcome their truancy issues as most improved. The Walter Dansby Achievement Award also recognizes the most improved underclassmen. At this time, I'd like to announce the nominees, and I will ask them to come forward as I call their names and their campuses. From Amon Carter Riverside is Brianna Judith Marino.
Wait. Don't get them.
Why don't you go head over that way and we'll get a picture when it's all over.
From Arlington Heights High School is Amber Louise Shank. From Diamond Hill Jarvis is Marissa Orozco. From Dunbar High School is Bumina Jabir. From Eastern Hills is Alexis Spears. From Northside is Jennifer Ramirez. From Polytechnic is Ashanta Barrera. From Southwest is Aaron Brooks. From Trimble Tech High School is Anissa Levert. From OD Wide is Bernard Nuzambi. And from Western Hills is Gladys Jimenez.
Shorter ones move to the front.
Get in front of me and I'll pull this back.
Judge, before you take that picture, I want to congratulate all these young people for making the step to recognize that your education is the most powerful tool that you'll ever have. That you have figured that out and incorporated it into your life's plan is a very mature step. Don't go back to where you were. Let's keep moving forward. And Judge, since Fort Worth ISD, I've got most of it.
Come over there.
And most of these high schools are in my precinct. I need a piece of this picture.
Hopefully until all flashes.
Bravo, bravo.
Okay, is that it?
One more, one more.
Okay, got one more? Okay, we're there. Thank y'all. And I will move that we receive and file.
Second. And I'd like to recognize Mr. Ernie Horn, who is
Ernie, stand up.
the head of Score a Goal in the Classroom.
Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. And Commissioner Fickus, I believe you have a proclamation of ratification.
We do. We have a proclamation for ratification that was presented yesterday at Mount Olivet Memorial Day service, and I move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Court members, you have before you the consent agenda.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. McMillan is going to be presenting item 3 this morning.
Good morning, Judge, Commissioners.
Morning. Good morning.
We're asking the Commissioners' Court to consider a request for tax abatement. For several months now, the Fort Worth Chamber, Tarrant County, and the City of Fort Worth, along with Hillwood representatives, have been working to locate a major data center project to the Alliance area. Winter LLC is proposing to develop and operate a data center to be located on approximately 110 acres of vacant land on the northeast corner of Alliance Gateway and Park Vista Boulevard, as shown in the map here attached. The project will comprise of approximately 250,000 square foot data center facility with spending of an estimated $250,000 for total investment for the first facility.
250 million.
I'm sorry, $250 million. It's been a long weekend.
Slight difference.
$250 million. In the agreement, since this slide was done, there's been a little bit of change on how that $250 million is going to be divided out. The agreement actually calls for a $150 million investment in real property and $100 million minimum investment in business personal property. But it is anticipated the investment will be actually higher than those minimums. The overall project is expected to include construction of one or more additional facilities at a similar investment amount within 2 to 7 years. And we have set forth those projects in 2 separate agreements so that each facility would get a full 10-year abatement. So what we have before you today is actually abatement agreements for 3 facilities, the initial facility and subsequent facility A and subsequent facility B. At each facility, the initial facility, they're expecting to employ a minimum of 30 jobs as required in the abatement agreement. Average salaries at that location will be in excess of 150% of current county wage, around $70,000 or more. And additionally, there will be contractor jobs that will not be included in that minimum 30 job requirement. The City of Fort Worth has approved a tax abatement and an economic development program agreement for the project, which provides up to 20 years of incentive payments in the form of grants tied to increases in real and personal property taxes, sales tax, electric franchise fees, and other revenues. The county is proposing participation in tax abatement for each facility constructed at a maximum of 60% for Tarrant County taxes and up to 40% for Tarrant County Hospital District taxes for a period of 10 years, again, for each facility. We have before you today 3 agreements for your approval. Each agreement would provide for the abatement of ad valorem taxes for Winter LLC for the location of a new data center facility at Alliance Gateway Park for a period of 10 years at a maximum abatement percentage of 60% to Tarrant County taxes and 40% as it relates to Tarrant County Hospital District taxes, set forth in all 3 agreements. Do you have any questions?
So we're talking about at least what we're doing here today is 3 separate agreements. Each one would be for approximately the same size building, 250,000 square foot, 250 million.
Correct. Each
Expenditure.
agreement calls for, in order to get abatement, it calls for a minimum facility of 250,000 square feet and 250 million in investment.
Okay.
The jobs, is that a minimum number?
The minimum jobs is 30. They anticipate that each building will have more jobs, but there is not going to be an additional jobs requirement for the subsequent 2 buildings. The minimum jobs on site is 30 jobs, and again, they anticipate there could be more. That's just the minimum. And they're going to be independent contractor jobs, but those are not hired by the company. We were looking strictly for the company jobs because those would be guaranteed what we know as far as salaries and also benefits.
Lisa, it was my understanding on this DBE requirement that they had agreed to meet the City of Fort Worth's DBE policy. Is that not the case? This asks for a complete variance, which is...
Well, we're requesting from a variance simply because we're not going to provide a penalty if they do not meet our levels, the 15% DBE requirement of contracting and the 25% of Tarrant County. However, in the agreement, the owner does say, it says the owner intends to spend on each level. They intend to do that, but there's no penalty. So that's the difference, and that's why we're asking for a variance. Now, with the City of Fort Worth, the City of Fort Worth has structured their rebate or their economic development program agreement where they get a bonus for meeting those levels. So it's a little bit different. So they ask that they expect to meet some of those levels, but they didn't want it to have be a penalty by which they would lose abatement. So the company actually was hoping to get a bonus abatement for us, but we felt like we didn't want to rise above the 60%. So we felt that if they meet the City of Fort Worth's goals and get bonus on their end, but they'll also meet ours then, we just won't have to provide any additional tax abatement.
I agree with not having to provide additional tax abatement. I also would be satisfied if they have committed to meet the City of Fort Worth's DBE policy because it's more stringent than ours. But it seems that there's some wiggle room in even that.
I think that in order for the company to maximize their incentive, I think there's a strong incentive for them to do what they can to meet those goals with the City of Fort Worth in terms of spending. And the City of Fort Worth has put levels in their agreement that are actually higher, as you said, higher than our requirements. So I feel confident that the company will be trying to meet those goals. And they will be reporting to us. They will be in our annual evaluation form. They will be providing information to us actually what their spending is.
A lot of that spending will have to, I mean, what I think you said is that the construction of the building itself, we're looking at about 100 or 150?
150 million. So, the majority of that would come from that building. Now, a lot of that is a data center, some of the type of equipment. It's going to be kind of
Most of the equipment's going to be purchased, I'm assuming.
the equipment purchase is right, and the installation of that equipment is kind of, going to be specialized, so it may not even be a local company that puts in that equipment because of the specialized nature of putting in those that servers, the large
I
servers.
certainly understand exemptions for specialized equipment, but we're talking about 3 plain vanilla buildings here.
And that's why we fully think that they will be able to meet a majority of those percentages when you take out some of the specialized, in which ours does. So we feel confident that they will be.
And I think the
working toward
incentives
that.
there are what Fort Worth's certainly looking at. I might venture to guess that these may not be as plain of vanilla buildings as we. I mean, certainly the exterior part, I'm not going to disagree, and maybe the foundation part, but my guess is there's going to be a little bit of. Well, there's probably going to be a little bit of some specialized.
For a data center, you have to take into consideration ventilation. You have to have special redundancy. So it's on the outside, it may look plain vanilla, but the structure and so forth.
You know,
But-
yeah, it's not rocket science. Ventilation is something that is pretty standard.
Well, I think,
They've
you know,
been built before.
similar, you know,
They've been built before.
similar to what we requested when we brought to you the General Motors project last week, because this is a special case, and we felt like that was warranted. So that is why we're requesting that we move forward with the intent in the agreement. It just wouldn't require a penalty if they didn't meet it.
Lisa, do you know if they own the buildings or lease the buildings?
They will be owning the facility and the buildings initially. There could be a time where they, and that's allowed for in terms of, in the agreement as far as movement to an affiliate or some sort of clause like using it for collateral. But initially, they're going to own the buildings.
I would appreciate it if you would express to the developer that meeting DBE requirements is a core value of this county, and that we will not be pleased if it's not their core value as well.
I will do so.
Only 15%, right?
15%. Yes.
15, 1.5?
Correct.
1.5. And I would echo what Commissioner Brooks just said.
So we're asking you now to provide approval of the 3 agreements that you have before you, along with the resolution.
I move approval.
Second. We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Your Honor, ma'am, I'd like to make a comment on that particular project. I want to just thank Ms. McMillan and also Mr. Harris. We took away their Memorial Weekend to get all this done, and so they did an excellent job on this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Had to travel.
Ms. Tidwell.
We have one item that we're asking the court to consider this morning, and that is to receive and file the quarterly investment report for the period ending March 31st, 2015.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote.
Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously. Ms. Glenn?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Chicken?
We have 2 items for the court this morning. The first item, we're asking the court to receive and file the personnel agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
For item number 2, we're asking the court to approve a waiver of terminal benefits for County Court at Law number 2. Judge Reimel has a court reporter who's retiring at the end of this month with 295 vacation hours. Judge Reimel is requesting a waiver effective June 1st with a cost to the general fund estimated to be approximately $17,600, including fringe benefits.
Move approval.
Second.
A motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Vinnie?
Morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
Members of the court, good morning. Public Health has 2 items before you for approval. Item number 1 is approval of a memorandum of understanding between Tarrant County and the Hispanic Wellness Coalition related to our Carnival Day Salute event. This year will be the 10th year of this event running at Public Health.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Second item before you for approval is the 2015-16 Texas Department of State Health Services Community Preparedness Section, Biotourism Section, Ebola grant funding contract. This will be used mostly to purchase goods and services to enhance our capacity to respond to such events.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Manius, I believe we're going to bring one of our briefing items up regarding public health at this point in time.
Yes, Your Honor. Members of the court, on the briefing agenda today, we have the Health Department and health updates. This is Dr. Argan Bright, who is the director of the Moncrief Cancer Center, and here to make a presentation.
Judge, Commissioners, thank you for having me this morning. Wanted to give you a very brief update on an initiative that happened back in February. This is the Healthy Lives Matter initiative. I'd like to say that this morning I'm also assisted by Evan Smitherman, who's part of the Moncrief Cancer Institute, and also Dr. Tanasia from the Tarrant County Department of Health. The Healthy Lives Matter was an initiative, a prostate cancer screening initiative that occurred this year on February the 14th, Valentine's Day. It took place at the Department of Public Health and was led through Commissioner Roy Brooks's office, and we're very thankful and supportive of his leadership and basically making this event possible through his vision and his leadership. This was an event that was coordinated with the Tarrant County Public Health, with JPS, with Texas Health Resources Fort Worth, and with the Moncrief Cancer Institute, along with assistance from Commissioner Roy Brooks's office. Wanted to this morning give you a very brief update on this very important initiative, and we're going to go through the attendance results, the screening results, what it cost, the amount saved, and then our future events. As I said before, this was a prostate cancer screening event organized by Commissioner Brooks. The first thing, in order to have a successful event, you've got to get the word out, and you've got to get people who know about this. And so we reached out to churches, community centers. We used social media and went very much into some of the targeted churches and got 10 pastors to attend a pastor's coffee. The result was that 80 men, along with 50 of their significant others, attended this event, and the demographics of this were very important. I really want to point this out, that number one, we reached the target audience that we were trying to reach. Over 85% of the people who attended this event were African American. And if you look at the second slide, we were also very pleased about the age demographic, because this was a prostate cancer screening event that was targeted mainly for those men between the ages of 40 and 60 years old, and 2/3 of our attendees were between that particular age demographic. This was an event, we talk about prostate cancer screening. Prostate cancer screening is also being aware of your risk. And so each man who took part got an individual risk score. And of those, 80% decided to go to the next step and go ahead and get what is called the PSA, which is the blood test for prostate cancer screening. And 64 men chose to receive that PSA out of the 80 who were counseled. The results were that of those 64, 4 of those were found to be elevated. 3 of those were already known to have an elevated PSA previously. The one at the bottom here is what really matters about this event. We found a 52-year-old African-American with no history of any symptoms of any prostate disease at all, with an elevated value of a PSA of 8.23. This particular gentleman is still going through the diagnostic and treatment workup, so I'm not able to give you a clinical diagnosis at this time, but as you can imagine, someone who's 52 years old with a PSA that's over twice the normal limits is very concerning and very possibly indicative of something a little bit more serious. I'd like to talk to you about the economic impacts of early detection, especially with prostate cancer. There's a very large impact in finding prostate cancer early versus late, and there are lots of different impacts and economic impacts that are associated with this. We have differences in treatment costs, wages saved, as well as emergency department and hospital savings. Just to let you know, there's a total treatment savings of about $18,000 in an early stage cancer versus a late stage cancer. The big economic savings come in the fact that whenever we are able to find a cancer early and save that life, we protect the life of someone who continues to work and continues to engage in society, support their family, pay taxes, and be a very integral part of our community. And we estimate that over a 10-year period of time, a life saved in early detection versus late detection puts another $486,000 back into our economy in the form of wages. And then, of course, there are emergency room and hospital visits that are not incurred because we catch that cancer early. So according to a lot of the economists and a lot of published work, a total savings of about $500,000 for an early stage versus a late stage prostate cancer is certainly reasonable. Let me tell you about the return on investment on this particular event. This event cost in total dollars about $45,000. Most of that is donated time, but we went ahead and loaded that in for this particular analysis. The actual hard costs were about a third of that. If you look at that amount of investment, $44,000, versus this one case where we found potentially an early stage cancer saving $506,000, our return on investment on that is over 1,100%. We feel as though that this was a success. We plan to do this again in 2016. We plan to do that going beyond. We've probably outgrown our current venue of the Tarrant County Public Health on Main and Rosedale, so we'll be looking at a venue that can attract, that can hold a larger number of people, because we think that this is something that we want to continue on to do because of the benefit that we approved in this very first time that we did this. And again, I want to thank Commissioner Brooks for his vision and leadership for getting this off the ground. So I want to thank you for having me today.
And I want to thank you, Dr. Argenbright, for your leadership, for the leadership of the Moncrief Cancer Care Center, and the other partners who were involved in this group: JPS Health Network, Tarrant County Public Health Department, THR Fort Worth, and the funders, which included Aetna, Cigna, and who else, Shannon?
United?
United Healthcare, yes. They have taken a tremendous interest in this event and in the health of our community. The reason that we targeted African American males is because it is proven that they are of much higher risk of prostate cancer than the community at large. As we go forward, I envision expanding the scope of this event so that it will include whoever wants to come and be screened and tested. But we do expect this to be an annual event, and as we go forward, we will find more and more cases, we will save more and more lives, and the return on this community's investment in this activity will just continue to grow.
Very good. I also want to thank you for your support on the Senior Synergy. We had over 2,000 folks that attended this year. We're already planning next year to figure out a way to get those mobile units inside the building as opposed to the outside parts.
It's about ventilation.
Yeah, it is. You'll have to, it's all about that special thing that we have to do to buildings. So we appreciate, though, very much your support, Madam.
Thank you for your support, and thank you for supporting this very worthwhile event.
Thank you, Dr. Argenbright.
He was my doctor until he gave up primary care, and then he decided he wanted to go into other things.
And I'm so glad he did.
Me too. Okay, back to our agenda and purchasing.
Your Honor, other members of the court, we have three items for consideration this morning. Our first item is a bid award recommendation for bid 2015-141, sale of recycled paper. Our recommendation would be toward the high bidder, Federal International, at the rate of $40 per ton.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Item number two is another bid award recommendation for RFP 2015-043, sale of contract for network equipment implementation services for information technology. A recommendation will be toward to the high score per category, Category 1 being for data center and layer 3 routing being awarded to NetSync Network Solutions. And Category 2, which is for end user and access layer switches, to CDW Government.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And our last item is also a bid award recommendation for RFP 2015-114. It's an RFP for mosquito control ground spring for the Public Health Department. Recommendation would be to award per the terms of the contract, selecting as our primary vendor Vector Disease Control International, as our secondary vendor Municipal Mosquito.
We better get ready for this year. Move approval.
Second.
Yeah, I would suggest that if we don't have a contingency in that budget, we better build one. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank
you, Jack. Are there any appointments? There being none, then you have before you the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
A motion is second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Manius?
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court, we have two items to bring to you this morning yet. The first is an update on the West Tarrant Transportation Initiative. Mr. Riley is here to address the court at this time.
Good morning, Judge and Commissioners.
Morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to provide y'all with information and an update on the West Tarrant County Initiative. The purpose of this initiative is for Tarrant County continues to experience significant growth in population and employment, surpassing the overall growth rate of the entire state of Texas. Specifically, areas west of Interstate 35W are expected to double in population over the next 15 to 20 years. The West Tarrant Transportation Initiative, other known as WTTI, provides an opportunity for communities in western Tarrant County to prepare for the impacts associated with growth and development through collaborative and comprehensive transportation planning. The scope of this initiative is through discussions with impacted cities, surrounding counties, school districts, Tarrant, or TxDOT, and the North Central Texas Council of Governments. The WTTI seeks to identify strategic transportation corridors that will be critical to ensuring adequate connectivity and capacity necessary to meet the demands of future growth. The culmination of this process will be a report that identifies needed improvements to strategic priority corridors. The next slide shows the a map that of the four focus areas of the WTTI and their demographic growth through 2040. This information was furnished by NCT-COG, and I just want to point out that our focus area number one was really northwest Tarrant County. It's bordered by I-35 and State Highway 199, Denton, Wise, and Parker County. If you would notice, the projected increase in traffic through 2040 is 125% over what it exists today. Focus area number two is bounded by Interstate Highway 820, Jacksboro Highway, US 377 that runs through Benbrook, and the Parker County line. Notice that the increase in traffic and population will be 109% as projected through 2040. Focus area number three is bounded by I-35, I-20, US 377, Parker, Johnson counties. And if you'll notice that the focus area 3 has an increase of 97%. Our fourth focus area is the area located inside Loop 820 and I-20 and I-35. And as you notice, the focus area increase in traffic and population is about 41%. That's due to it's already pretty much built out to this date. On the next slide, progress that we made to date is we had an initial meeting back on June 5th of 2014 that was to present the challenge to meeting the future transportation needs of West Tarrant County. We also had a follow-up meeting in November 5th of 2014. We presented regional demographic forecasts, discussed the need to develop a composite map of thoroughfare plans to resolve inconsistencies in the thoroughfare plans of the different entities. Then we had focus area meetings of the 4 previously mentioned focus areas, and we discussed specific focus area arterials along with projected volume and trip increases. January 7th, we had a meeting with the City of Fort Worth, a coordination meeting to discuss their master thoroughfare plan process and the county providing information from our meetings with our stakeholders for their information. On March through May, to date, we have had individual meetings with the key stakeholders, entities, so forth. We've met with almost all of them. We still have a few to meet with. And on March 19th of this year, we met with TxDOT and discussed their funded and unfunded transportation projects that they are pursuing. The entities that are participating in this initiative are Tarrant County, all the municipalities on the west side of 35, the school districts, North Central Texas Council of Governments, and TxDOT. Next, I'd like to present some of our preliminary findings as far as roadways. A couple of them I'll highlight is like the completion of State Highway 199. This is from A20 up to Azle, an east-west corridor connecting Azle to the Alliance area. Presently, there's only one crossing between the lakes, and it's across the dam. So there's a need for that part of the county to be able to access the Alliance area.
Is there a slide for that?
Oh, the next,
There you go.
yeah, it is, I'm sorry. And there was the widening of RM 2871. It's a connection between 377 and Benbrook up to I-20. It's kind of a cut through that would take out a lot of time and distance. Improvements to Boat Club Road, a lot of discussion about the widening of Boat Club Road north of where it's presently widened, and also the congestion that is at Boat Club Road and Azle Avenue. If you're familiar with the area, it's very congested. Lots of traffic go through that intersection. And the widening of Azle Avenue from 820 down to Long Avenue. Presently, it's 4 lanes down to a certain point, but it probably needs to be widened further down to Long Avenue. Bailey Boswell extension to connect Saginaw with the North Tarrant Parkway. That would be a big help as far as access over to 35. Extension of Heritage Trace Parkway has been brought up several times with several entities. Extension of Hip Hill from Fort Worth into Burleson. The extension of Alsbury to connect with the Chisholm Trail Parkway. Transit options to serve the Burleson Crowley communities. And recently we had a meeting with Parker County, which was very productive. We haven't got the minutes noted yet, but they will be forthcoming. But the next steps are June 2015 will conclude our coordination meetings with the various entities. April 2015 through April of 2016, coordination with the Fort Worth Master Thoroughfare Plan update. Presently, Randy Skinner represents the county on their MTP resource panel, so he is giving them our input as we go through their process. And June 30th, hopefully we'll have the completion of the preliminary WTTI report. June through July of 2015, we'll have follow-up meetings with the City of Fort Worth and TxDOT to give them the information that we've gained through our meetings that we've had. And October, November of 2015, there'll be analysis and prioritization of corridors. That would be with the assistance of COG. They've got all the information and the means by which to analyze all the information that's needed. And that will be done through their Unified Planning Work Program, which is presently going through their approval process now. And December of June of 2016, we look to develop the implementation options for this initiative. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to field them.
Questions?
Thank you.
One of the things that I would say in some of the meetings that we had, in fact, I attended the last meeting where we had representatives from Parker County. Judge Mark Riley came over. He brought with him Friesen Nichols, who has participated and helped them with their master plan in Parker County. They're also working with Fort Worth on their master plan. And again, it was a matter of looking at the roads, and what we discussed in that was the importance of setting some priorities. I think Parker County, I know that they have talked with the folks from Walsh Ranch. Have y'all had a chance to meet with any of the Walsh?
We have not yet.
But I know that y'all have got scheduled meetings with Hillwood and with some of the bigger developments, Walsh Ranch, and some of those folks to try again to lay out a grid where we've got not only east-west roads going, but also north-south roads. And Friesen Nichols was very familiar with what Parker County was looking to do, and what Judge Riley said is that, they wanted to be sure that as they went down the road and as they set their priorities, that those priorities, many of the roads that we're talking about, they're already making sure will connect at the county line. But what we don't want to have happen is Fort Worth set, or further down in the southern part where it's unincorporated, we don't want to set a road going across, and they've got the road, but they don't have it as high a priority, and so we end up with a 4-lane road ending into a county road on either side. And so that's a lot of the prioritization that will occur kind of as we go forward. But I think and we know that Fort Worth's completion of their plan is, months and months down the line. But what we found was initially, I guess, in your meetings, some of the cities really didn't have an idea of what to look for, and that's why you ended up going to the individual meetings as well as meeting with TxDOT and with the RTC.
Correct. We want to get all the information that we can out of the city so that when we go back to the City of Fort Worth, we can be a little bit clear on what some of these entities' priorities are, and hopefully that they will take that information and make sure that we have connectivity of these routes and corridors.
And while it doesn't, while we talk about the prioritization by the end of November from that standpoint, if we look at the funds, we're not exactly sure what's going to come out of the legislature, even at this point in time, even as late as it is. We know that the monies that we approved last fall with the Prop 1 money, that money has pretty well been allocated. A lot of that money has been allocated for the next 3 to 4 years, at least within the region. Now that's about, I think, $200 or $300 million. I'm seeing not only Bill, but also Brian Barth, who's our district director from TxDOT back there. A lot of that's been allocated toward the direct connects on 360, as well as some work on 20, where 20 and 30 come back together out to the west of us. But if additional money is coming available as a result of what the legislature is doing now, then I believe that where our money is going to best be spent or looked at is going to be in having shovel-ready projects. And that may mean working with the cities or with other counties, adjoining counties, in creating interlocal agreements where we can have something ready so that if funds are left over, if funds are available, if some other area of the state doesn't end up using their money, we've got projects, and we've been very successful over the last few years with TxDOT, and if we had projects on the shelf, we've been able to get some of those funded. So that's part of what we're looking at, and I think part of what we're moving down the line on. But I know that Casey's also helped with the Boat Club Road. We think we know who owns it now. We're not absolutely, you do know. You're absolutely, you got that down. But it was not an easy task in finding out who owned it, because everybody said they didn't. But
Until you build a road across it.
yeah,
Then they'll
so
all
we're
come-
trying to.
they'll
build
all
it.
tell you then.
Commissioner Fickus.
You mentioned $300 million. Is that for the Fort Worth district, or is that for the North Texas region?
Brian, come on forward. Don't speak from back there, because some of us are hard of hearing.
And while he's coming forward, Bill, I noticed that the extension of Reisinger Road was not included in your list of projects.
And there's an asterisk in there that says that this isn't a total list, but just a few of the ones that have been, it's in our list of all of them, but I didn't want to list them all.
Brian Barth, your district engineer for the Texas Department of Transportation in Fort Worth.
Good morning, Brian.
Good morning. The answer to your question, Commissioner, is that that's an estimate for the whole entire Metroplex. As you're well aware of, that number varies with the amount of receipts that come in from the oil and gas industry.
Basically.
Yes.
We had to borrow some money from the eastern portion of the region to provide financial backing for the implementation and the funding of the I-30 and 360.
Which is already paid back. So moving forward, we're moving forward with that 1/3 number.
And that's about 4 years' worth. We've got about, the projects that we've identified under the Prop 1 between the west and the east, we've used up the funding, the estimated funding out of that Prop 1 for probably about the next 4 years.
That's correct. The RTC took a conservative estimate on what that revenue would be over the 4 years and picked projects for those 4 years in all the North Texas counties.
And the key part there is they took a conservative estimate. So if that number goes up and we've got projects sitting on the shelf, it's likely that we may be able to get some of that money. In addition to that, if some of the other funding options that the legislature was looking for goes into play, those won't come in until probably the following fiscal year. So it would probably be 2016, 2017 before those monies will actually begin to be distributed.
It's so currently the plan is if one of those bills pass, the election to approve the constitutional amendment happens in 2017. So it's past that money becomes available.
Tell me what the status of Nichols' proposal on the sales tax on vehicle sales. Do you know what the status is?
I can give you what I know as of last Friday. So the Nichols bill is to use vehicle sales tax, and that would be up to the first $2.5 billion goes into general revenue. The second $2.5 billion goes into TxDOT revenue, and then it's shared 50% above that. Pickett's bill is the first $3 billion of just general sales tax goes into transportation, and then it's 2% above that. The transportation gets 2% above that. What I understand is that Nichols and Pickett have agreed to move forward, whichever one of those is most likely to pass the House. And then I know that the Speaker of the House and Lieutenant Governor are still debating amongst themselves about which one of those approaches they prefer.
And if that passes, that doesn't have to go to the people for a constitutional vote, does it?
Yeah, both of them include constitutional amendments, so they would have to go
So
to.
it's a dedicate, to
it
dedicate it.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's SJR 5.
That's correct.
Okay, so that would be another vote. So that's, again, though, that's why if we can get projects identified and if we can help, some of those projects may be state projects, and whether or not y'all have the engineering funds or not, we'd have to just wait and see. But a lot of those projects that are not are going to be projects with communities, with municipalities, or with adjoining counties. And in order to get those on there, we may have to enter into interlocal agreements with the cities or adjoining counties to get those plans drawn and to have those ready and on the shelf if the funds come available.
And just, we want to play our part. We're going to move forward with the state system roadways in the western side of Tarrant County and the eastern side of Parker County, and then even some down in Johnson County and Hood County to get those projects planned and environmentally cleared. We're going to move forward.
And that's
on that.
basically Boat Club. That's 199. Is Silver Creek that's not, would you like to take it?
Well, let me
I'm
go.
assuming that was a no.
Let me go through the list that we're going to work on. 156, FM 156, frontage roads on 287, Boat Club Road, 199, FM 1886, which is an east-west corridor, FM 2871, a north-south corridor from 30 down to 377, 3325 over in Parker County, which is a north-south corridor that ties into 20 and 1187. 1187 south of what Parker County has done to date down to Aledo, bring that around towards 377 and the Chisholm Trail. And then, of course, our big initiative is the I-30, I-20 project from downtown Fort Worth out to Weatherford. And we're taking a very strategic approach to that to try to make as much use as we can of existing infrastructure, looking at the metrics as far as where the bottlenecks are, what the condition of those facilities are.
Is that a Prop 1? Is that one of the priorities of Prop 1
It's
under
got
RTC?
It's got some seed money from Prop 1 that we'll use to get maybe the first project that comes out of that ready. And then 377, we're working in Benbrook. We want to continue that work south down to Crescent and Granbury. And then 35W south of 20 is another big project that we've got to get environmentally cleared.
So south of 20 from where down to where? Down to Burleson or the cutoff at 67?
Well, initially from 20 down to Burleson to the county line, but we really need to take it all the way down to where our counties and close to Hillsborough.
Tell Harmon just to write the big check.
Brian, let me go down to a smaller project, but y'all had signs out at one time on on Boat Club Road from Bailey Boswell out past school out there. What's the status of that? Are we going to get that done?
So that, we relet that because of some issues we had with utilities. I believe we just relet that, so construction should start anytime now.
And one other thing I might caution, and this because of the rain that I've really noticed this, but the TU right-of-way, because of their lines running down through there, they've had tree trimmers. Seems like they're trimming those trees and all the limbs and everything are in the middle of your ditches. They're not picking them up and cleaning up as they go behind them. You might want to.
We'll get out there and look at that.
Okay.
That's a problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if they're trimming those trees like they trim those trees in the neighborhood, there ain't much of a tree left when we get through.
Yeah, but they're,
just
sometimes
leaving
they'll
it.
pile it up and sometimes they just cut them and let them fall. I mean, they're just, it's a horrible job they did down through there.
We'll get out there and look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Brian.
It is, but it's in their right of way. That's the point I'm making.
Thank y'all.
Their drainage.
Anything else from me?
Any other questions?
Not at this time.
Run for cover. We're good.
Members of the court, just a very quick update on the legislative process. We have 1 week to go. At midnight this coming Monday, we'll be signing died. We had a pretty aggressive weekend this weekend, but it seems like we beat back a lot of the issues that we were dealing with. The only other item that's out there yet is they haven't passed the budget, and it's still in conference. And we're watching that very closely as it relates to revenue issues and appraisal caps. So we should know within the next 2 or 3 days, but we're starting to come out of the session and it's starting to look okay for us. I'll be more than happy to try to answer any questions that you may have on Mr. Mendez's memorandum.
Just keep an eye on that budget bill, because they can hang some awfully bad stuff on that
It's like a Christmas tree.
Yeah,
Yes,
they tried to hang the revenue caps on there this weekend and gave it up on parliamentary.
Yep.
On some parliamentary procedures, so
far.
Yeah.
Your Honor, I need you all for about 20, 25 minutes and closed, and that's all we have this morning.
Okay. Then we'll proceed, we'll recess our open meeting and proceed to close to discuss items exempted under Section 551.071, 072, 074, 076, and 087 of the Texas Government Code. Thank you. You want to call our meeting back to order?
Young man, and you know it.
At this time, we'll return from closed, and we have no business to conduct out of closed. And so at this point in time, we're not going to be calm. I'm not going to adjourn you. He's over, as nervous as a cat. And I'd like to, I think Commissioner Fickus has an announcement he
I
wants.
do, and I want to let everybody know that we're kind of sad around Precinct 3. Carolyn Sims, who's been with us since I became commissioner in January 2007, she will be retiring. And Carolyn's sitting over here. We're going to miss her. She is moving on in her life, and we are going to have a reception on the 5th of June. That's not this Friday, but the following Friday, at our Northeast Courthouse, and everyone's invited. And let's give her a big send-off. And I think she's excited about new opportunities and moving on, and so we're going to miss her greatly. And as I've said many times to many people, there's some people that, somebody can come in and do a great job when they leave, but there's some that are pretty hard to replace. And Carolyn is one of those that's going to be extremely difficult to replace. So thank you for all your work, and we really appreciate it. So, thanks. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Manius for our work session.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court, in our work session today, we're going to be discussing the hospital district's proposed bond package. We're going to have a series of presenters. We have a fairly lengthy PowerPoint. Obviously, please feel free to ask any questions that you have during the presentation. And then we are going to ask for an action item from you at the conclusion of that presentation. With that, I would ask if Reverend Emerson, who is chair of the Board of Managers of the Hospital District, would like to address the board.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good afternoon, Pastor.
Yeah.
First of all,
It's not quite afternoon yet. We're still,
Yeah,
it'll be afternoon by the time we finish.
I have a rule in my church that we be prompt and then we can dismiss. And since it's 6 minutes to 12, our goal is to get out of here by 12.
Somebody needs to be ready to pull the plug on that clock in about 3 to 4 minutes.
First, I must say that I want to say to GK, thanks for the payback that he had us sit the length of time he had us sit. So that means I've already talked to the CEO. He cannot have a cookie when he comes to the next board meeting. But it's an honor to stand before you and talk with you today and just share with you just a few things. First of all, I've been on the board of managers for almost 6 years now. I served as chairman of the planning committee. I've served as vice chair. I've served as secretary. And the board of managers have sought their confidence in me to allow me to be their chair for the next 2 years. They just told me I cannot preach during those 2 years. But one of the things I want to share with you is that the years I've sat, we have looked at our facility. Not only have we looked at our facility, but one of the things I would say to you, we've done one major improvement. And that major improvement is that we hired a first-class CEO. And that CEO has gone about to move JPS to the level that this community wants. But we cannot keep pushing as a board of managers, CEO, better programs, better services, when we won't work to give him better facilities. We are continually putting now Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids. Our citizens deserve improved new facilities. And so I would ask that you would see where we are. We've had meetings on top of meetings on top of meetings, and many of those meetings I was blessed to chair. And we have looked, we have traveled, and so we just would ask each commissioner that this does not just benefit downtown Fort Worth, but that new facility, if you approve it, will benefit every district, every precinct. So we thank you. I teach in my church. Faith is you think before you ask. So I'm thanking you, believing you will grant it. Thank you.
Amen.
Commissioner Brooks, you had this look on your face as far as payback. What I tell the good reverend and the JPS people is that our closed sessions are much shorter than theirs.
Oh, no question.
Absolutely. There we go.
No question.
Okay. This is Mr. Early.
But I don't try to pay back people whose prayers get above the ceiling.
I was not referencing Reverend Emerson. I was.
Move the mic closer.
Yeah.
Mr. Manius and members of the court, thank you very much, and members of the board. There's a couple folks that I want to thank, and the 5 members of our board that are here today, and the other 6 members that couldn't come because of conflicting schedules. We have an incredibly good board, and I want to thank you as court members for appointing those board members who have a vision for the future and who have ideas of what this should be. To echo Pastor Emerson's comments, Pastor Emerson has been involved in this project from the very beginning. He chaired the planning committee. The planning committee began to discuss this when we were looking at an overall facility plan 6 years ago. When we started to put into the concept and the ideas of talking, what is it that this organization is going to need? And those talks were internal talks in the initial stages of them to try to figure out what we present. So the 5 board members that are here today, I think, play a keen role for us, as well as their other 6 colleagues that are not here today. I also want to thank Mr. Manius. Mr. Manius has spent a great deal of time outside of this arena to figure out how to put information together. And I want to thank Mr. Manius because his was not to persuade. His was not to do anything except put facts together, and he worked with our staff and Scott Rule and the other folks at JPS that have worked exceptionally hard on this project to present to you all that effort. So I want to thank Scott, I want to thank Bill, and I want to thank the other presenters that are going to come here today, because if you want to learn today, you'll have that opportunity. If you want to see the details today, you'll see those details. All of this plan is overlaid over an overall strategic plan of JPS. One of the things that I think that you all are well aware of is that the environment that your public hospital serves in is a changing environment. What we are being forced to deal with today, we didn't deal with. 5 years ago today, we weren't even talking about, to the extent we're talking about it now, an electronic medical record. 15 years ago, we weren't talking about some of the aspects of HIPAA that we're talking about. In the old days of JPS, it was more ward-like. Everybody was on a floor in a ward-like situation. Commissioner Brooks knows that well because he walked those hallways. He saw it, delivered lilies at Easter time during that time period. That ward switched to having rooms that had multiple patients in it. Now the environment is private patient rooms. JPS has to evolve, in my opinion, as the environment evolves. We're having new demands that are placed upon us. It's very, very difficult in a room with 3 patients in it to adhere to HIPAA guidelines. It's very challenging from an infectious control standpoint to deal with what we have to deal with. So the environment that we live in is changing, and it's changing just simply because of the population growth. We have the luxury of having a community that people want to live in. We have good government. We have a good system of infrastructure throughout this community. We have good schools. We have good hospitals. People want to live here. So in order to keep up with that pace of that movement of population growth, you have to expand what you have. And that's what we're asking you all today. And we're asking to take a look at that. The other thing that I would tell you is that we have a constant need to watch for efficiencies within our own system and keep in mind 2 key groups of people that are dear to us, and that's our patients and our taxpayers. And in both of those situations, we're trying to figure out innovatively what we do with research and education and what we do with better technology to help out our cancer patients and to help out the individual that has a chronic disease, to help out the person that comes in with whooping cough and everything in between we deal with, from our clinic structure to our school-based and on. So what this is a method to try to do is adhere to the advancement of the strategic plan and keeping in mind the patient first and foremost and the taxpayer that helps support it. So that's what you're going to hear today. We have told everybody to be conscientious of time, but also be conscientious of the need to display information and to provide the best information that we can possibly give you with some of the brightest people that we've brought in to help with this project. One of those individuals is Phil DeBruzzi. Phil is with Blue Cottage, and Blue Cottage is located in Houston, and what their goal is to look at every aspect of what we're doing, and he's going to give you an idea of some of that, and then we're going to go through the rest of the presentation and we'll overlay the strategic plan and how that fits so you can kind of get an idea. So with that, Phil, if you would come up and take it from there.
Phil, welcome to dry land.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. It's a lot wetter than we all expect. Perfect. Thank you. Again, good morning. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. As Robert mentioned, I'm with Blue Cottage Consulting. We're a national consulting firm working across the country on planning hospitals, advising hospitals on operational change. And so I've had the pleasure of working with JPS last summer and fall on some of the material that you'll see here today and that you have in front of you. But I'd like to start with a little bit of what Mr. Early touched on, which is the market context and kind of the imperatives here. So again, you heard a lot about healthcare change, Affordable Care Act being implemented a while back. The fundamental business model of healthcare delivery is changing. It's not changing a little bit, it's changing a lot. And so we're running into this across the country. Providers are re-equipping themselves, whether it's facilities, whether it's operational performance, whether it's technology, to really embrace what you're seeing happen across the country. Again, the model is not about just caring for patient after patient and focusing on the volume, it's focusing on value now. Okay, and so things like quality, your costs, the patient experience, those are the elements that will be rewarded for, will be judged, in the community about whether we're successful or not. So as we, think about the future, we got to think about it through that lens. In addition to those changes, we've got a population that's aging. The baby boomers are aging. They drive 4 to 6 times more healthcare use than the average American. That's happening across the country. And so, you meld that with the need to manage patients with chronic conditions and keep them out of the hospital and keep them in a lower cost setting. You need to really be organized not only to deliver inpatient traditional hospital care, but outpatient services, behavioral health services, kind of all of those elements. So as we get to our market's doing some of those things with aging. We've got an aging population here that's driving up, again, healthcare utilization and volume. We've got growth. Not everybody is in the same situation you are. A lot of my clients across the country are kind of struggling with a little bit of that. So there's additional pressure on all the providers in the community, but particularly JPS, to handle a growing population. And, the role of JPS, obviously, as a safety net provider, public hospital, the level of uninsured patients in our community is pretty high still. And it may, get worse before it gets better. So it's important that we make sure that JPS is equipped to deliver on that future. And so we've got a little bit of a summary of what's happening on the campus and a little more detail here on the departments. But really, as outpatient demand grows, it's growing a lot faster than inpatient, but as outpatient services, clinic visits, things like that grow, we're responding to that, but we're also changing the way care in the outpatient setting is being delivered as well, team-based care. So physicians communicating together and being able to be near each other. Medical homes, Mr. Whitman will talk a little bit more about what a medical home is and how JPS is responding to that, but really coordinating the care and being there for the patient is the point. A little bit of what our challenge is, as I see JPS compared to other organizations across the country, is there's a lot of bifurcation, splitting of services across the campus. We'll share a little bit more about that, but that creates communication challenges. It creates a poor experience for patients. They have to go from here, and they get an elevator and cross over the bridge to the other side of the street for care. We incur costs and inconvenience of moving patients around. So it's those things that are challenging and concerning as we think about, again, a new future. And so on a department level, we're experiencing high census, a lot of volume, so we're full in terms of inpatient beds. We have bottlenecks that sort of can't get ED, emergency room patients out of the ER and into a bed if they need to. We've got outdated facilities that hard to accommodate new technology, new care delivery models, semi-private rooms. We've evolved, obviously, in that respect, but private rooms in terms of patient quality, outcomes, and satisfaction is where a lot of organizations are heading. Again, a number of locations, disparate locations. Behavioral health is in multiple locations, and so when you think about our mission around teaching, bringing up the next level of trainees and future healthcare providers, having them go to different locations and not having a cohesive continuum for certain services so they can experience really what it is to treat and care for a patient, is not where we want to be. And as we think about just our clinics and women's care, just getting to those clinics can sometimes be challenging. Getting to OB triage if I'm an expecting mom, or I'm having issues and I need to get care right away. So getting to those services is efficiently and effectively is a little bit of a challenge. So what I'll transition and leave you with is we kind of think about, well, if we don't do anything, right? If we continue to go into the future with what we have, we will not match that demographic growth. We will not meet the healthcare needs of the community. We will not be able to optimize the financial performance of the organization. And they always say, without a margin to support your mission, that could be a challenge. Affecting what will the impact of us not being able to care for the needs of the community, how will that impact other healthcare providers? With the patients that we typically see. I would say the last couple things, we would, continue to probably spend more money as we're trying to retrofit facilities, trying to move groups around to really get to the physical adjacencies and the technology that we want. We won't get what we really want and need, but we can kind of get close, but the cost will be much, much higher in doing that. And I think, no doubt that efficiencies will be negatively impacted. We won't be able to realize what our true potential is, with an organization that's got such a great culture and a great group of people. They're just hindered in a lot of respects by the facilities and technology. So with that, I'll transition over to Mr. Whitman around talk a little bit about the facility needs. And we've been on this process since last summer. Actually, it's been longer than that. But this is a process. We're at a point in time that we wanted to share some of this information with you. We've involved a lot of users, met with a lot of the staff in terms of the upfront planning so far. There's still more planning to be done. There's more discussions with community and bringing in, the patients that really will experience this in the future as we kind of move closer to design. But we're on this path, and I think Mr. Whitman's probably the best to speak to the facility needs because he lives and hears it every day. So, thank you.
Perfect. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Bill.
Okay, my role, my challenge, is to describe for you the current facilities that we operate in, for those of you who aren't as familiar with the inner sanctum of JPS. This is not about aesthetics. This is not about having a new building. This is about elevating the care and the services that we provide the citizens of Tarrant County. And what I want to do is describe the components of this proposed construction plan, which is a hospital, a psychiatric facility, and a renovation of existing facilities. But I want to talk about the operational challenges that we currently have in the hospital. When it says lack of appropriate adjacencies in departments and services, let me tell you what that means. We've got a psychiatric emergency center on the 10th floor of our patient bed tower, which is on the west side of Main Street. Okay? Trinity Springs Pavilion, which is the inpatient facility for psychiatric patients, is not close to the 10th floor of the patient bed tower. It's a very large parking lot and then some away. So visualize that if you will, but I'll show you a footprint in a moment. That's one example. Another example is our emergency department and our urgent care department. Our urgent care department is on the west side of Main. Our emergency department is on the east side of Main. We have two separate triage and registration areas. There are many, many transfers from urgent care on the east side to the emergency department on the west side every day. There are transfers from the emergency department on the east side to the urgent care on the east side every day. Semi-private rooms. Although all of our rooms on the east side of Main Street are private, it's the newer facility that was constructed in 2008. Only 50% of our rooms on the west side of Main are private. Now think about the implications of that. You've got to have the same sex in the room. You have to watch out for infectious disease. Sometimes you have prisoners occupying those beds, and you can't put anyone else in those rooms. So you have to block those rooms, so to speak. The implications of having semi-private rooms are tremendous, not to mention the privacy issues, lack of support space, because when this tower was built in the late 70s, we didn't have an electronic medical record. We don't have adequate storage space. When you have a curtain separating beds, that doesn't promote privacy. That doesn't lead to the satisfaction level that we seek to provide for our patients. Inability to group hospital patients by service line. What does that mean? That means we don't have enough capacity today to put all of our, for instance, orthopedic patients on one unit, our cardiology patients on one unit. They're separated because of the issue with semi-private rooms, because of telemetry issues that we now have telemetry in the pavilion, the new facility, but not so much in the current bed tower on the west side. So transferring patients back and forth is problematic. When you don't group patients by service line, you don't have the efficiencies and the effectiveness that you otherwise could have if all of your nurses and staff were trained to treat only orthopedics. So you have some issues with quality. You have some issues with length of stay. And you have some issues with cost as well. Lack of capacity. The number of semi-private beds and rooms that we have today exacerbate the capacity issue that we face each and every day when we see up to 25 patients that are waiting for beds in our emergency department. Now, we've mitigated that somewhat by creating an admission hold unit. but we still have patients waiting for beds. Will we ever eliminate that? I'm not proposing this plan will eliminate it, but it will certainly mitigate it considerably.
Is that 25 patients per day, Mr. Whitman?
Up to.
Up to 25 patients?
Up to 25
Waiting in the
patients.
ER?
Waiting in the ED,
Per
in the
day.
emergency department for an inpatient bed. Depending on the day of the week, the number of patients that we have in-house, the acuity of those patients, that's a frequent issue for us. Psychiatry. We transferred 1,400 patients to other facilities last year alone because we didn't have capacity to accommodate them. We turned down over 700 requests for psychiatry patients to be transferred in to our psychiatry, or Trinity Springs, because we didn't have capacity. Inefficient, insufficient access points. Again, urgent care. It's embedded within the patient bed tower on the west side of Main. There's no sign out front that says urgent care. You have to have been in urgent care to really know where to go. To combine those would be very, very efficient. Women's services. OB triage is a very, very needed service, which we provide. But once again, it's embedded in the patient bed tower on the west side of Main. There's no unique access. There's no entry point to that. You have to come in through the main revolving door and actually, hopefully, know where you're going or ask someone how to get to OB triage. A very needed service. Our clinics, our outpatient clinics, there's no identification as to how to access our clinics unless you've been there. Go to the hospital on the west side of the street. Well, that's not a great way to identify your clinics. And again, psychiatric emergency center on the 10th floor, you have to have been there. The next footprint. This kind of gives you a perspective of what I was talking about. Start with Trinity Springs. And this is not going to show. So, somewhere between the outpatient clinic building that you see on the left-hand side and the bed tower toward existing conditions is Trinity Springs. The bed tower, the 10th floor of the bed tower was where PEC was, the Psychiatric Emergency Center. So a patient might come to the 10th floor. He might be delivered there by police. He or she might have a medical condition. What happens? After they're psychiatrically evaluated and stabilized, we take them down the elevator. They go across the walkway on Main Street to the emergency department. Then we might send them back to the 10th floor. Then if they need admitting, we're going to take them down the elevator again and find a way to get them to Trinity Springs, which is a parking lot away. If we have patients on the 4th and 5th floor of the pavilion, same thing. If they're downgraded, they're down an elevator, across Main Street, over to the bed tower, which they have to take another elevator up to the upper floors for a lower level of care. Main Street kind of separates what we're trying to provide on this campus. Urgent care is in the outpatient clinic building. The emergency department is in the lower right-hand corner, close to where the blue is. So back and forth again along that walkway. We're looking to develop a common triage area, a common registration area for both those services. Patient transport is a real issue for us. Semi-private rooms, we talked about that. Again, half of those beds on the bed tower on the west are semi-private. This is what an average room looks like today. Separated by a curtain. You can see there's very limited space. There's no space for technology. There's really no space to accommodate patient visitors, families. This is an existing condition in our neonatal intensive care unit. There's lack of privacy. There's lack of family-centered care standards. We can't control the lighting, which obviously is critical to the development of the neonates. This is an example of our inpatient pharmacy, although this is outpatient pharmacy specifically. It's crowded, it's congested. We don't have room to put some refrigerated carousels, which is a rotating piece of equipment to accommodate the medications that need to be refrigerated. All we do is line up refrigerators along a wall. Hood areas are insufficient for the number of compound mixtures that we mix every day. This is an example of our urgent care waiting area. And we've talked about the distance before. So when you walk into urgent care, that's often what you're going to see. You can see where urgent care is located by the blue dot on the left and the main ED on the right, and the distance one has to travel to get there.
The parking lot that you referred to earlier, is that Trinity Springs way over there on the left?
Trinity Springs is, yes, that's the parking lot between that building, which is Trinity Springs, and the urgent care label. That's the parking lot that they have to go across. There is a hallway behind that that leads to laundry and linen and purchasing and the loading dock, and that's a hallway we use as well. Correctional health. We have approximately anywhere between 7 and 10 non-Tarrant County inmates within the walls of our facility every day. Now, we have a special unit for the Tarrant County inmates, right? Unless the volume is such that we have to put them on the floor, they're pretty much contained. But now we've got 7 to 10 other municipality or federal inmates throughout our facility, next to patients who aren't incarcerated. And we're having prisoners, inmates, sometimes in shackles, sometimes in orange jumpsuits, that are sitting in waiting for tests with patients that are not incarcerated. That diminishes the patient and family experience, obviously, that we're trying to provide. Behavioral health inefficiencies. As we talked about, inadequate capacity. We talked about the transfers. Every single room in Trinity Springs is semi-private. Every room. That's not in keeping with today's standards in behavioral health care. When you talk about having to block rooms because of psychosis, diagnosis of particular patients, age, gender, it's a problem. And that speaks to why we have all the transfers that we have to displace, not to mention the state hospital beds that routinely cut back because of their funding. And we have to absorb that.
Bill, let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Please. Behavioral health is a particular concern of mine because it seems to me that we do a lot more behavioral health in our county jail than we do anywhere else in the county because of lack of capacity.
Correct.
How will this proposal increase our capacity to service people without them having to get arrested to have their mental health needs met?
Well, we've expanded behavioral health clinics throughout the county as a result of the DSRIP projects. No question about that. And that's having great success, but we're only scratching the surface. This proposal, as you'll see later on, will add 52 beds to the current 96-bed capacity for Trinity Springs. You know, Commissioner, many of the patients that we see at JPS, behavioral health is a component of their illness. Whether it's their primary component, it's probably secondary to a degree. And you're right, mental health is a concern for us, and it should be for the citizens of Tarrant County. We are the only psychiatric emergency center in Tarrant County, but we have to get beyond reacting to issues. We've got to respond to issues and be more upfront, out front within the community. And I think you'll see the springboard of our behavioral health clinics and outpatient clinics proliferate. That's not necessarily a direct component of what we're proposing in this bond program, but we will continue to expand those clinics throughout the county.
Bill, you made the comment that it'll add 52 beds. Did I hear you say we currently have 92?
96.
96. So that 96 equates to 48 rooms.
148.
And so we're going to make those all private rooms.
Correct.
And so that means that we're going to be adding 100 rooms and come up with a total of 148.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And we'll talk about that in a moment, but we'll also shell some floors for future expansion.
Okay.
The next footprint just shows you what we've been talking about. There's the 10th floor of the Psychiatric Emergency Center. There's Trinity Springs to the left. And there's the main ED. Now, when we propose a new behavioral health facility, we're going to make that a complete, comprehensive facility. There will be no need to transfer patients to the main ED for medical care. We're going to put those physicians in Trinity Springs. So that will eliminate the need.
And you'll triage over there as well?
Absolutely. Psychiatric Emergency Center, observation for behavioral health, inpatient behavioral health, and medical evaluation and care for patients will be in Trinity Springs. That's the proposal.
Excellent.
You'll still have the problem if somebody presents in the emergency room to get them from the emergency room over to Trinity Springs emergency room.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, we will. But we hope that this new building is identifiable, that the wayfinding is such that for that segment of the population that knows they need help in that regard, they can come there.
Okay.
There's a segment of the population, obviously, that doesn't know they have behavioral health issues, and they will go to the main ED perhaps. Outpatient services, again, operational inefficiencies and the quality of care challenges, lack of capacity. You're going to see in a minute that we have patients waiting in our hallways. That's our waiting room for our clinics. We have high-volume clinics like orthopedics and family medicine located on upper floors of the outpatient building today. That's not where those high-volume clinics should be located. Outdated design. We've got privacy issues. We've got handicap accessibility issues. We've got nursing units that are undersized. And, again, the hallway waiting. And we've spoken a few minutes ago about insufficient access points and wayfinding because there's no way to identify the outpatient clinics exteriorly on this building. This is an area that hasn't been touched from a renovation perspective in over 25 years. This is an example. This happens every day. Every day. Every day those clinics are open, that's what those hallways are used for. Registration for our outpatient clinics occurs in multiple locations. And obviously the design of the clinics, which is interior to this building, limits performance improvement and productivity enhancements. Pedestrians. This is a picture taken from our parking garage adjacent to the outpatient building. Patients, pedestrians, families, visitors walk across in front of outgoing traffic. So you have cars that are leaving that parking gate, turning right into the crosswalk of where our pedestrians are walking across the walkway. Handicap parking is not convenient. It's not adjacent to the current building.
If they're in the crosswalk.
Pardon?
If they're in the crosswalk.
If they're in the crosswalk, and that's not guaranteed that they will use the crosswalk.
That's right.
We want them to be right there, though, as cars are exiting, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but that's where it is. Okay, the components of what we're asking you to consider. It's a new inpatient tower, it's a new psychiatric hospital, and it's renovations to existing facilities. The benefits of the patient tower. We're going to increase the number of beds, private beds. 87 additional beds to meet future demands. And we're also going to shell 2 floors. Obstetrical unit, we're going to expand from 62 total beds to 80 private beds. We propose to expand our labor delivery and recovery rooms, that's the LDRs, from 15 to 18. And that will provide for an additional 800 deliveries per year. Neonatal unit, you saw the picture, going from 35 bassinets in a combined ward type setting to a proposed 40 in private rooms. Emergency department, expand additional 16 rooms to allow for 20,000 visits a year. In GI, we're going to relocate that closer in proximity to our surgery area, and with improved design and improved throughput, we can see 1,000 additional patients per year.
Bill, is it safe to assume that wherever you say additional beds, that in addition to the 80, for example, inpatient, in addition to the 87 additional beds, however many semi-private rooms that we had, there'll be that many more additional rooms, because at the end of this, there will not be semi-private rooms?
Except for certain rooms in the tower that we are currently planning to provide for inmates. Now, we may have the space, have the capacity to make even all of those rooms private. But the plan is to move all of our acute care patients to the east side of Main Street, leaving the hospital on the west side of Main Street for inmates and perhaps a skilled nursing unit. But yes, we'll eliminate all of our semi-private rooms.
The only possible semi-private rooms that we'll have left will be for the prisoners?
Perhaps, and that might even be private as well.
Okay.
And, Your Honor, whenever we can do that based on classification, it actually saves the county money because you don't need to have as many guards.
Right.
Correct. Best practice examples. This is just an illustration of what several of our board members have seen when they've made trips to University Health System in San Antonio, to Dell Children's Hospital, and to Parkland. So what you see on the left is the current waiting room for urgent care. What you see on the right is University Health System in San Antonio's waiting room for urgent care. It's not because they don't have fewer patients or they don't have as many patients. They have as many, if not more. But they're configured in such a way that those patients are immediately taken from the waiting area and put in an area most conducive to the care and to the triage and to the assessment that they have today. They actually have people coming out and assessing the problem in the lobby with those patients. We could do that today, but all we would do is say, continue to sit here and we'll be right back with you as soon as we can. Best practice examples again. This is the room you've seen before. This is Parkland's inpatient room. And let me just reemphasize, this is not about aesthetics. This is not about aesthetics. You can clean this room on the left to the extent that you could probably eat off the floor, but it continues to look dirty. It's just a given. It's the age of the facility. It's the lack of space in the facility. It can be clean. We do keep them clean, but they don't look clean. They just don't. It's about infection control. It's hard to practice good infection control when you've got 2 and 3 people in one room. It's about creating a healing environment, because we all know if a patient's satisfied, if their families are satisfied, they're probably going to get well in a shorter period of time. So this is not necessarily the design that we're proposing. This is an example of what we're seeing. Neonatal, we've talked about that quite a bit. These are examples of what neonatal units in hospitals today look like. This is Dell's Children's on the left and Parkland on the right. Private rooms where the families can bond with the neonates. We don't have comparable JPS pictures, but I can describe it for you. This is a typical nursing station at University Health Systems in San Antonio. Look at the patient floor corridor on the right-hand bottom most of that slide. You don't see anything except that one wheelchair. If I were to show you a picture today of JPS, it won't look like that. We don't have the alcoves, we don't have the storage space to store today's equipment and get it out of the hallway. That's a real important safety feature as well. Psych hospital benefits, obviously moving from semi-private to private, and this will certainly mitigate the number of transfers that we have to send out and will allow us to capture those transfers that request to come to JPS. It will offer a full continuum of care in one location.
When we transfer psychiatric patients, where do we send them?
There are several hospitals in the community that accept them. Millwood, Sundance, get many of our
Private psychiatric.
private psychiatric. And those that have coverage, we sometimes have to transfer those to Millwood and Sundance. Those that don't, we have to end up paying for their care because they're our patient. That's the only condition upon which they'll accept the patient. It's a problem. This gives you an example of what we're proposing in the psychiatric hospitals we've talked about, 96 to 148. We're shelling 2 floors for another 48 beds if we need those, and this will provide for an additional 3,000 annual admissions. Psychiatric Emergency Center, expand that from 20 to 30 treatment rooms, and that will provide for an additional 7,000 treatments per year. Renovations to existing facilities. We're obviously going to be able to provide for a medical home on the campus of JPS. We have one medical home today, and that's in Southeast Tarrant County. This new renovation of existing facilities will enable us to provide for a medical home on the first floor of the patient bed tower, where we are on the west side of Main Street. It'll certainly provide adequate treatment, support, and waiting and registration areas. It'll improve space utilization, and it will also protect pedestrians as they cross the weather and provide protection from inclement weather. Now, when we renovate, the proposal is to create an additional 20 exam rooms in these 6 clinics. And those 20 exam rooms, plus the reorientation of the current clinics, the revisions to those clinics, will enable us to see upwards of 40,000 additional patients per year. This is the footprint. This is what we're proposing. This is the site plan diagram. And since my pointer won't work, I'll have to walk you through it. Main Street are the red dots, okay? North is north, south is south. The orange, brownish colored rectangular building with an appendage there just to the right of Main Street, on the east side of Main Street, is the new patient tower. That's a large 10-story patient tower. To the right of that is a central utility plant, and to the northeast of that is a parking garage, which we have to accommodate the volume of patients and visitors that we see. This will provide for an additional 2,300 parking spaces.
How many parking spaces do we have in our parking garage now?
Oh, in the garage, Commissioner, I think we have something like 3,500 total spaces, including surface lots. I don't know how many the garage holds today, but this will expand it by up to 2,500.
Any reason why you're not providing a connection from the garage directly into the hospital?
And that could well be as a result of the additional planning that takes place. This is just a proposed configuration of where that garage might go. So it would make sense that we could probably find some way to do it in the detailed plans. We'll have to have an enlarged central utility plant of 15,000 feet to support the new construction. As you're working your way south on Main Street, you'll see the kind of square bluish building to the east, to the right. That's the current pavilion. And the renovation that would occur to the current pavilion is to create a common triage and registration area for urgent care, which is to the south of the pavilion, and the emergency department. On the far left side, you see Trinity Springs. That's the proposed new hospital that goes in that parking lot area, if you will, between the current bed tower and Trinity Springs.
Now, the blue is what you're renovating.
The blue is renovation.
To the right of Main Street, you're saying that's going to be the urgent care triage area?
Well, you see to the right of Main Street, that little square that's kind of brownish orange.
I'll go along with orange.
Yeah, burnt orange, maybe not even a good burnt orange, but close. That's proposed urgent care. It connects to that blue building, which is currently the pavilion.
And that pavilion currently, it's how many floors right now? Is it
5.
5?
Uh-huh. But the ED, the emergency department, as you know, is on the first floor. We would propose to make that lobby a common registration and triage area for urgent care and emergency department.
So as they come into that lobby, if they're urgent care, they'll be sent to the orange square, and if
You
they're
can
not,
just,
they'll-
you can just divert them, right.
Okay.
Bill, have y'all taken into consideration or figured how much of your current capacity you're going to lose during construction?
Well, I don't know that we'll lose much of any, Commissioner, because the domino effect is that we would construct the central utility plant and patient tower first. So there would be no
Before you renovate?
decrease in service.
The existing building?
Then you move the tower patients to the new patient tower, and then you're able to renovate. Okay, I'd like to transition now to Matt Nelson. As you know, First Southwest is our advisor, as I think they are the county as well. And they have subcontracted some of this financial performer work to FRG. And Matt Nelson will now walk you through some of those performers.
Okay.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So my name is Matt Nelson. I'm a partner with Financial Resource Group. As Bill said, we're working through First Southwest, which is the financial advisor for the system. And our part of the process is to prepare long-range financial plans that would support the capital and the bond programs. We've done this in other places. We've worked with Harris County Hospital District. We've worked with Parkland in doing long-range plans, Ector County Hospital District. We've also provided financial consulting services to Jackson Health System in Miami, Florida, and Maricopa Integrated Health System in Phoenix. So we have good experience with this. The financial forecasts were prepared with the information and recommendations that were in the Broadus report that we've been discussing. Separate pro formas were developed for each one of the models, or each one of the components, I guess, of that plan. And we take in our process a very structured approach and a very conservative approach when we're developing long-range plans like this. And we believe that the forecast bears out the ability of the system to meet the financial measurements that are needed to build and fund projects like this. So that was the first slide. So I'll move on. We go down, or we start, everything we do is assumptions. So everything that's built when we do these type of models is through an assumptions. And so we start with the volume and revenue reimbursement rates. We had an annual growth rate of 1.5% on inpatient and outpatient growth rate of 2%. There's no change in the payer mix. We kept the payer mix constant. The average length of stay was reduced 1% annually, and that matches information that really came out of Blue Cottage that was in the Broadus report. And the state disproportionate share revenue increased. There was a consultant that worked on that and gave us those projections, was increasing 1% annually. The 1115 waiver and the DSRIP revenue were reduced 1% annually. So those were the revenue and volume. Productivity, we looked at various scenarios, but in the forecast we use an annual 3% productivity and operational improvement over 10 years. And that's really, in the productivity side, look at what would it take to meet industry averages. And that was only the average. Right now, JPS has 6.9 FTEs per adjusted occupied bed. The benchmark is around 5.6, and we say over a 10-year period, by having a 3% productivity improvement, you would reach that benchmark. And this improvement really comes about through several things. It improves It comes about through efficiencies of the new facility. So anytime, Bill talked a lot about, you saw the pictures of how things were structured and how things were apart and things. This is, putting facility where all the services, a lot of them are being performed in one area. And so the patient flow is easier. The supplies are in the right place at the right time. So you get a lot of efficiencies there. You get improved processes, patient flow I talked about, and then technology, having that. So those were some of the things that really drive some of that productivity improvement.
Your assumptions with regards to annual patient growth, both inpatient and outpatient, how does that compare to what we've actually experienced over the last few years?
It's in that same trend, and it actually, when we talked earlier about a 15% growth between 2015 and over the next 10 years, this is actually growing about 18%. So I think even in our assumptions, it follows the trend that's been there, and it also continues that trend. So I think that is reasonable, and it does fit the population growth that we've got. So on additional assumptions, the property tax. So there's no increase in the property tax rate in the model. There is a 2% annual increase on the property values, which we believe is very conservative. The inflation factors for revenue, it's 2% annual increase. And for expenses, for salaries, which is about half of the cost, it was a 2.6% annual wage increase and a 3% on all other operational expenses. The bond financing assumes a AAA GO rating. There's $809 million. I'll show you the components of that on the next slide, but $809.1 million in bonds are authorized over, and it's a 30-year payback period. That 30-year period is less than the useful life of the assets, but it is typical of how healthcare finances work. So $715 million of that would be sold in February of 2016 with a borrowing rate of 4.5%. That 4.5% we think also is conservative. Right now those rates are around 3.65%. And so we're thinking in February, looking at the market, and this is coming from First Southwest, not me. I'm not a bond expert in that side. So from First Southwest, we put in the 4.5 on those 2016 bonds, and on the 2018 bonds, the $94 million for the renovation, that borrowing cost is at 5%. So again, we think those are conservative numbers.
GK, what's the lowest our appraised values have gone up over the last, even in 2008, 2009, 2010? Didn't we have growth?
In 2008, 2009, we were flat.
Flat.
But we have been averaging somewhere between 2.8 and about 3.5. However, we see it's accelerating. In other words, that amount of increase is increasing every year. And I believe that we're looking at something probably close to 4, 4.5. So the 2% annual growth is a very conservative number. And the reason that some of the projections that we've seen have only been for a 10-year period is because by the time that we reach the 10-year slot, then we will have had all the debt sold, and also the amount of increase would be significant or sufficient enough to carry that debt.
You mentioned there will be no increase in property tax rate. Does that, within the tax rate itself, are you shifting a percentage point from general fund to debt service? Even though the overall rate is the same, but are you shifting revenue from one to another? Are you planning to do so?
Hi, I'm Laura Alexander with First Southwest. We're assuming that the debt gets paid within the overall revenues of the system, so we're not differentiating a debt service tax rate from the general fund tax rate in our models. We could break it out, but we're keeping it flexible, I think, the way we've modeled it right now. You can pay debt service from the general fund tax rate. That's allowed.
Okay. So, is it allowed?
So the question is, will there be an INS tax rate on this that will be embedded in the overall tax rate?
There could be, but like I said, there doesn't have to be.
Okay. So the answer to your question is yes, that with the current tax rate, because of the growth, that the financial analysts believe that there'll be sufficient revenues to pay the debt.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's fine, thank you. So on the next slide, the project cost assumptions. This is the first time you've seen the components. So the new inpatient towers, $511 million, psych hospitals, $102 million, parking garage, $73 million, and the central utility plant's $25 million. So that's the 2016 bonds would be those four components. The hospital renovation and backfill is about $94 million. The total bond, about $5 million in transaction costs, so the total bonds are about $809 million. So on the financial projections, first what we do is run a baseline. So we're saying, basically it's a reflection of what the health system would look like financially if you didn't have the capital and bond program. And looking out 10 years is a long time to look out in a forecast. You tend to, after 3 or 4 or 5 years, it's just a guess. It could be anything. So we try to run something that's reasonable and conservative when we're doing a forecast like this. The total revenue, the components are net patient revenue, tax revenue, and the other operating revenue. And the other operating revenue included the 1115 waiver, the DISPRO dollars, and the DISRIP dollars. The operating expenses are net of interest, depreciation, and amortization. And so what we're trying to do is come back, so the calculation comes back to the net cash available for debt service, so EBITDA. So the bold in the middle of the slide is the EBITDA, or the cash available for debt service. Right now, the annual debt service is about $4 million a year. So dividing the net cash available by divided by the annual debt service, you get the debt service coverage ratio, which is really high in this case because the hospital doesn't have, or the system doesn't have much debt. Days cash on hand are between 100 to 135. So that's the baseline. And so we compare everything then to the baseline. The baseline was run with 2% productivity improvement and operational improvement. When we ran the forecast and moving to the new hospital, we used 3%. So we added a 1% factor to that. And that 1%, it goes back to what we talked about, the efficiencies you get in having a new facility and the things that you're doing there. If I go then to the forecast, you can see the net cash available has climbed quite a bit because we have more efficiencies. We also have more revenue that's being driven through because of the psychiatric hospital expansion of beds and also the hospital expansion of beds. And when you start looking at this, the bonds are sold in 2016 and 2018. We started recording interest when the bonds are sold, so we didn't capitalize the interest. The main hospital goes into service in 2020, and the backfill and renovation goes into service in 2022. And so you start looking at the annual debt service. It's by 2017 it's $51 million, goes up to $56 million. The annual debt service coverage stays above 2 through the project. Once the system is fully, everything's fully in operationally is 2020, and then the backfill is 2022. So those numbers are anywhere from 2.07 to 2.18. They're above a threshold of 2 on the debt service coverage. And the days cash on hand, once everything is fully in, still stays above 100, getting up to 130, and is around between 113 and 130. So those measurements all fit, and again, we think they're very conservative, but they fit within a model of looking at this type of project.
Well, help me understand.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned 3% improvement in productivity or efficiency, right? Mm-hmm. Is that 3% over 10 years or 3% per year for 10 years?
It's 3% per year for 10 years. Yeah, and that gets
30%. In 10 years.
In 10 years, but
straight line.
Right. If you did a straight line, yeah. Okay. But it goes from staffing of 6.9 to about 5.6, 5.5 or so. So yes, sir.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from you is by building these new facilities, mm-hmm. you will be able to align workflow and space.
Yes.
And improve efficiency in moving goods and services and people around. Just that saving alone would generate 3% in efficiency per year for 10 years. A total of 30%.
Right, if you did straight, yeah.
Okay. with the new facility, do you need to employ new employees to take over to fill the space, buy new equipment, buy new technologies, and things like that? Is that all figured into the bond package?
Yes. The equipment and all of the new things are figured into the bond package. There's new IT, there's a lot of other new clinical equipment, and those are all figured into the pricing on the bond package.
All the IT equipment, technologies?
Yes.
Healthcare technologies, the whole 9 yards?
Yes.
Are included?
Right.
So the $809 million we're looking at just not brick and mortar?
Right, that is correct.
And then what about the additional cost of staffing additional employees?
Yeah. There's I guess several thoughts on staffing. Some of it is right sizing. So it's getting the staff in the right place doing new processes. Some of it, so there'll be some retraining on components like that. Some of it is just the fact that, you've got a different structure in how you're providing the care. So nursing units are structured differently, so you don't have long walks or moving patients around all over the place. So you may be moving, training some people to do certain things that they never did before, and some people the project or the jobs aren't needed anymore. So there's a lot of mixture in how the staffing is accomplished. So it is through efficiencies, it is part of through new technology, and part of it's the process. It's always people, process, and technology when you're looking at things like this.
I guess the question here is, with all this new investment, how many FTEs are you planning to bring in to cover the additional needs? Are you telling me that the total number of headcounts will decrease instead of increasing?
Right.
Well, but I think you went from 6.9
FTEs per adjusted occupied bed. So
per adjusted, so it won't be less employees because you've got more occupied beds.
Yeah.
But when you look at the dollar cost as a percentage of the occupied beds, that percentage should go down.
Right.
So again, you're not talking about necessarily less employees. You're talking about less employees per occupied bed.
Right. And there could,
Fickus,
yeah.
I think you had a.
Yeah, I've
Yes,
got
sir.
just a question. I'm sure you've got the answer. Do these costs include what I would call soft costs? Architectural, engineering, plans, permits, testing?
Yes.
All that stuff?
They are all in costs,
And
yes.
do you know what percentage those numbers?
Is that the 4 million something?
No, that's actually the transaction costs. And so within the building, the true building costs, there is a component of that that's separated. I don't know the.
I don't know the percentage off the top of my head either, but we can certainly give you that information because we do have that information.
And I'm assuming there's contingencies built in there too.
Yes.
7, 8, 9%.
Probably by the time you add in the contingencies, you may be talking about 15 to 20%.
Yeah, there's significant contingencies built in, absolutely.
Okay.
And we can give you those as well.
So numbers you'll be bringing us would be the soft costs in that as well as contingency numbers in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Okay?
And these numbers also have been inflated for the time period. So we're not
Okay.
using today's dollars, we're using the dollars when they would be spent, estimate of the dollars
Yeah.
when they would be spent.
Well, you mentioned Parkland.
Yes.
My understanding, Parkland had a fairly significant overage in the building of their building. That concerns me.
Mhm.
Anytime you're dealing with this much money, that could happen. And I just want to be sure it
Right.
doesn't happen here.
Absolutely, I think we're
And
going to be able
what
to.
safeguards would we have? Who estimated these costs?
Yeah, actually, we had two separate estimators independently provide cost estimates, and then Broadus Blue Cottage actually reconciled those, or did a third reconciliation of those estimates. So with very granular detail, we actually have, in essence, 3 estimates on this. Another thing that's important, Commissioner Fickus, is that as we prepare those cost estimates, and keeping the current construction environment in mind, we're also very cognizant of the timing of construction, so we were able to build in some inflation escalations depending on work in progress as well.
how important is the 3% productivity improvement? How important is it to the validity or the stability or sustainability of the projection? What I'm saying is, for whatever happened, something happened in the future, you're not meeting the 3%, you're only able to reach 2%. Would that, are we still safe if that case happens? Oh.
And Matt, you can talk about the, excuse me, you can talk about the various scenarios we ran. Excuse me. Obviously, productivity is just one component of the pro forma. It's very important. We need to reach certain productivity improvements, whether we do this facility project or not. As was shown in the...
I understand that,
yeah.
right. But what I'm saying is, in the financial formula that we are using, that you are using, right, to project out JPS' ability to return and pay off the debt without raising tax and so forth, right?
Right.
How important is that 3%? If for whatever reason JPS is only able to meet 2%, okay, would that have a negative impact in the debt service rate and so forth?
Absolutely. If we don't meet those productivity goals or the assumptions in the pro formas, it'll affect the pro forma.
Okay.
And there's other components.
Will it crash the deal, I think is the question.
Right, but wouldn't say it was going to crash the deal. There's other components and assumptions. We can also offset productivity improvements by other financial performance improvements.
We can increase.
Whether it's reducing costs on our expenses or eliminating the wage increases that are built into pro formas, or quite frankly, doing other things. So is it important? Absolutely. We wouldn't back away from the need to improve our productivity. It would negatively impact. But there are other things that we could do as well.
I mean, your cost of funds could go down 5 years into it, you could refinance and
Absolutely.
pick that up.
Reimbursement rates could go up. Most importantly,
Go up, too.
tax values of the property tax values could increase greater than 2%. There are a lot of moving parts. We're not going to back away from the need for productivity improvement, though.
Reimbursement rate will go up?
I'm sorry?
Reimbursement rate will go up?
Never know.
Are we living in the same world here?
Well, and it's, Scott was saying, we did scenario planning, obviously. So we looked at a lot of different things, and we looked at things like the tax rate. And so First Southwest gave us a model that said, what if the tax rates were 4% over the next 2 or 3 years, dropped to 2, and then towards the end dropped to 1 or 0? By moving that, just accelerating it towards what it really is probably getting closer to right now, puts an additional $65 million on spread out through that net cash available for debt service. That can offset that 3% going to 2%. We also looked at no payer shift. But if there is payer shift right now going from self-pay to Medicaid, that can have a substantial impact also. But we kept that constant. So we didn't we didn't make a payer shift from self-pay to Medicaid, because in Texas we don't know. So we kept that constant. The rate, the bond rate could be less. There's a lot of different moving parts. But we did look at the 3%. And the reason why we chose that is really looking at the benchmark at 50% of the competitors or the competitive environment. And we looked at, I think, 13 public hospitals and where they were. John Peter Smith was in the higher end of that. If you just go to the midpoint of that was the 5.6. So we're looking at not doing anything we're not saying go to the 90th percent. We're saying just go to the midpoint to reach that. It is a challenge. And I think, the leadership at John Peter Smith understands that's a challenge. And the other part of it, the quicker you do that, if we could reach 3% earlier or 4% earlier, something substantial, you could back off in the back years. But we think it's very important that it is a benchmark, and it's very important that the hospital look at that and be committed to doing that to make something successful. There's so many other things. We're very conservative in all of our assumptions, and so there's so many other things involved in it that can have a positive impact. So if we did only reach 2%, I think there's enough flexibility and other assumptions to look at that management would make changes, the right changes to get there.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Okay.
What's your current cash position in excess of your cash reserve policy? Do you have a cash reserve policy?
We do have a cash reserve policy, and I'll get back to you on that as well.
Okay.
So, any other questions on the
Keep on
financials?
going.
Okay. So I guess, I talked about the debt service, the days cash on hand. I guess, once again, we believe that the financial forecast bears out the ability of John Peter Smith to meet the financial measurements needed to build and fund these type of facilities. And so Bill will now discuss the operational and clinical measurements entailed in this process. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's me again. Accountability is awfully important to us, to each of us, and to the success of this project as well. And I'd like to share with you what planning our board did in 2013. I'm not going to go over every one of these strategic targets. This is basically our strategic plan. But we have certain metrics that we put in place. We have milestones for 2016. We have the ultimate target for 2018. This was a 5-year plan approved by our board in 2013. So this is what we focus on. This is how we construct our budget. This is what we have in mind when we talked about new facility expansion. This is how this proposed expansion will affect each and every one of those strategic goals that our board established. And as you can see, everyone is affected in some way, shape, or form. This is but a mere collage of all of the current operational reports that are provided to our board in an open meeting every month, every single month. We don't anticipate changing these operational metrics because we have a new building coming online. These operational metrics are sound, they're solid, they're accepted in the industry. We expect to see continued improvement in those metrics. But this is something that I think our board is very focused on. There are literally hundreds of metrics that we could track. This is but a mere example of the metrics we're currently tracking operationally, just operationally. But to track the success of this building project and to make sure that we stay on track, on time, on budget, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Morose from Broadus, who has much, much more experience in construction management than any of us, and he can talk about some of those reports that we will begin tracking for not only the board, but for the Commissioners Court as well. Bob?
Welcome.
Thank you. Which button, Mr. Manius? I'm not actually technology challenged, but I don't want to start running through
Yes, we handle all technology.
I see. That one right there, okay.
You're in trouble now.
You asked some questions about transparency and accountability and control during the construction process. This is an example of one of the kinds of reports that your program manager is going to be bringing to you. It'll be regular. It'll be on probably a monthly basis. It'll show you what the status of the budget is. It'll show you what the status of the schedule is. It'll show you exactly the kinds of information that you're interested in with regard to issues on the project. It'll show you project photos so that you can keep track of the visual process. A little bit of background on me. I work for Broadus & Associates. I'm vice president in both our planning group and our program management group. I was the individual who budgeted the University Health System project. I'm currently working for a private client, Memorial Hermann Hospital, and I just finished budgeting their project. I put together the budgets on your project. I feel very confident that the components that are necessary to carry out this program in terms of both soft costs and construction costs have been covered. You asked some questions. Soft costs, the medical equipment, of course, the biggest component, architectural fees, are about 40% of the total budget that you saw. 60% is the hard bricks and mortar, which is a pretty typical split. You have a lot more technology, a lot more medical equipment in a hospital project. See a very disproportionate amount if it were an office building, medical office building project. My role in this project so far, beyond putting the budgets together, has been to consult on the process. JPS asked us to work with them to make sure that they were doing things the right way, doing things in the right order. And I can tell you they've done it right. They've taken it step by step, run through the process the right way. The next steps in the process are education and preparing for the bond issue. That's where we are right now. They should be applauded. You don't have to do it now, but it would be nice at some point.
What was your name again?
Bob Morose. I used to do this in front of the Commissioner's Court in Bexar County 30 years ago when we were doing projects there, so I'm actually kind of enjoying getting a chance to talk with you guys.
In fact, your firm has a long history of work with this county as well.
So, and we're very, very happy
construction project.
to have had that history. From a schedule perspective, big picture, after the bond issue is completed, we'll be starting up. The construction process will go through the end of 2022. The psychiatric hospital will be delivered in 2018, the tower in 2020, and then at the very end of the program, the backfill renovations. That's a very broad brush schedule, obviously. But at this point, Mr. Manius, I think. Yeah.
Do you need somebody to come down there and show you how to use the technology?
No, it's.
I'm trying to find some of the audience that may know how to do that.
That's it.
I've got his name so that so as they come forward with the contingencies and all that kind of stuff, I heard him say that everything was in line, so Broadus is going to write the check at the end.
So, and Judge, this is the firm that used to work for Tarrant County? There they are. Some, I had them, I just forgot to say them. 12% owner's contingency, 5% contractor's contingency.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry to have left you on a lurch.
First time.
I'm just going to continue. Obviously, what we're looking at to move forward. Let me just make a comment or two. We've heard from numerous members of the court as to what you would like to see as we move this project forward. There's questions to be asked, there's questions to be answered, and we've listed some of the things that what we believe need to occur as we move forward. First of all, we need to continue to update the functional and space plan program needs. We do that by asking for a continual review of the material. Also, a very important element of it is to have citizen input and community outreach to show what the proposed strategy is and if we need to modify that. The Commissioners Court and the Board of Managers need to continue to be briefed on the planning process as we move forward to a November election. It's critically important that in a public setting, both the Board of Managers and this court are made fully aware of the activities of the administration and our staff as we prepare to move forward. You can go through the various other elements. These are all the things that we intend to work on. Now, the question then becomes, what do we do as the Commissioners Court? We're going to ask you to consider and take action on this particular section. I think what you've heard so far today is that there's been a compelling story about the need for these facilities. I think we've also found that in preparing for this presentation and for the planning process, which actually has been a 5-year process, that the interested stakeholders have been involved, those individuals who will actually be using the facility, those individuals that are knowledgeable in how you construct these facilities, and just as important, those individuals or consultants that deal with financing facilities such as this and how they protect us as it relates to tax rates. What I'm going to be asking the court to do is to authorize or support the efforts of the board by authorizing the administration to proceed with the calling of the bond election. Now, this vote today is not something where we call the election, okay? It's just a vote to proceed, because one of the things that we believe is important, when you look at the community outreach, it's time to have town hall meetings, quite frankly. Let's take this to the public. Let's see that we hear what the public has to say, because this is the public that's going to be served by these facilities. We're recommending that in each of the commissioners' precincts that we hold a community outreach or town hall meeting. And in those meetings, they will be actually called and sponsored by the individual commissioner with the full backing and support of the Commissioners Court. The hospital district and the board of managers will develop the presentations so that we can take this story out to receive input. Since it's in at least one in each of the commissioners' precincts, if there is a need or a desire to have more than one, then I believe that we should allow that also. The key is to get as much input as we possibly can in a timely manner. And then finally, we will be working with the JPS, because as issues come up and as questions that were raised today, you need answers. And we want to make sure that there is a free flow of information back to this court so you get the answers that you need, because in order to call for the election, it is the function of this Commissioners Court to make that call. And this call can't be made until August. It can't be any earlier than August 5th or any later than August 24th if we are looking at a November 2015 election. There are some other additional details here. So what I'm asking the court to do is to, by motion of the court, and we have it listed under the action section, to authorize these 4 elements and to continue our work in preparing for a call for the election in the month of August.
Also move.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
When would you propose to have the public meetings?
I would hope that we would have them in June.
Good.
Because whatever we hear from the public, if we need to make modifications, we want to complete that story.
Okay. Thank you.
I have 2 requests of the court. Number 1, the 4 total, 1 in each commissioner's precinct, that should be the minimum number. I feel like in my precinct, I need to have at least 2 because of the separation of the communities in my precinct. I ask that the court will be okay with that.
Sure.
I think they indicated that they may have several.
Yes, I just want to clarify that. Second, one of the board managers, Mr. D.T. Nguyen, has abstained from the vote to advance the bond package, and there has been speculation as to why he abstained. And I would like to hear directly from Mr. Nguyen about his reasoning for abstaining from supporting this bond package, for the sake of transparency, if that's okay with Mr. Nguyen.
Welcome. I think.
I do too. It's actually scary not standing
It's okay, DT.
What would you like to know?
Well, just tell the court why you abstained, because I have been hearing multiple speculations, and for the record, can you state exactly why?
There is multiple And my job, as I know, as an appointee, is to mitigate the risk for the hospital and the court. And at the time, I felt, first of all, let me make clear, we need this hospital. There are a variety of reasons stated by Mr. Whitman. To be able to take care of the people in Kent County, we really need the new hospital just to keep up with the demand. It's an aging facility. And on top of that, I think the way that we handle patient care today can be improved a lot more because there's a lot more demand for healthcare equality and healthcare equity also as well. And the transformation of the current business model, how you treat patients, needs to be improved over time into population health management and all sort of things. My reason for abstaining is not because I don't support the new hospital, but it's more things that needed from the system to be in place. We did not have the chief risk officer in place. We don't have a chief financial officer in place at the time to control this big project. We also have some other challenge is that we are going through a lot of healthcare changes, and this assumption doesn't have the assumption for bundle payment or episodic care. It probably will cost a lot more because the reimbursement will eventually coming down. And moving toward more value-based, it will require, I mean, the reason we need the hospital because the patient input and outcome counts a lot. But we can't do that with aging facility because it always looks less than adequate when you walk through. But the challenge that you have is that as you shift over to population health, you're going to have a lot more spending on the care management side, the outreach program and all that stuff. It will increase the cost before it can get better. And there's some other area where you're going to have use a lot of data. You're going to have to recruit a lot more expensive employee to keep up with the demand. And all that stuff needs to be built and looked at and have a contingency plan to make sure that as we embark in this journey, that we have a contingency plan. What if then this court will be prepared to take action? And I hope I'm wrong in this, but I think you're going to have a revenue shortfall and your expense is going to be higher than you expected. Those are some of the things that we need to mitigate going forward in order for me to fully support. I'm not against the new hospital, but I think we need to go in with a very clear vision that there's a possibility that we may have a revenue shortfall and the expense is going to be a lot more than we expected.
So your concern is not about the needs for a new hospital or a renovated hospital, but also some of the risk that you foresee because you are very involved in the healthcare industry, and you want to make sure that as we embark on this journey, we take steps to mitigate some of the potential risk that you are seeing, right? It is not that you are against the project.
No, I'm not against the project at all whatsoever. But
I want to make sure that that is understood.
No, I've been on this board for 3 years now, and I know that the needs for that. The contingency plan needs to be a little bit more clear to make sure, because you can't just don't give a salary increase to an employee if we don't hit a certain number. You've got to keep up with the at least a minimum of cost of living increase. And then you have a different job skill set that's going to be a lot higher skill set than what you currently have today. Hope that we can retrain up staff, but more likely when you go from treating to more healthcare informatics and moving toward more different shift in how you operate and treat patients, it's a different skill set.
So did you talk with people who were making the assumptions and discuss with them what you felt like your assumptions that you would want to put in there?
It's very hard, Judge. We have very limited time because we're a political appointee. We meet quite a bit from different
And I hear what you're saying from a standpoint of those assumptions. That was my area before I got here also. And I guess what I think I heard our people say is that they were very conservative. I know we're all making the assumptions that, or at least I keep hearing people say that revenue is going to go down. However, at least from a standpoint of if everybody is insured under the Affordable Care Act, then we should be getting more insurance. And I guess the bottom line on the deal is, I think we could write a blank check and spend as much money as, I think y'all could spend every penny we give you. And every penny more we give you, you could spend that. But what we've said in the past is, we're not giving you any more pennies. The tax rate is what the tax rate is. You're going to have to find a way to determine how much care you can give given that tax rate. And past that, it just isn't going to happen. And so there has to be some ceiling to how much money we're going to give. And I think as a court, we've said, this is it. So if reimbursement goes down, then there's going to be less care given in Tarrant County. And that's the reassurance I take, along with the conservatism of the assumptions that.
Oh, it's kind of hard to not, once you open the can of worms, you can't take back the care that you're going to be giving.
But see, we haven't opened the can of worms.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We've said this is the tax rate,
Right.
and we're not raising it.
The fact is that there are assumptions all over this deal. There are assumptions as to revenue. There are assumptions as to productivity. There are assumptions as to reimbursement rate. There are all kinds of assumptions here. But there are ways to mitigate the downsides of each one of these assumptions. I think by making very conservative estimates on cost, very conservative estimates on productivity increases. We've been very conservative across the board in making our assumptions. We've even been very conservative in estimating the growth of the tax base. I think that in being conservative and in providing the contingency accounts for both the owner and the contractors, we have done the best that we can do in mitigating the risks that one would normally foresee in this kind of project. And I'm ready to go forward.
Right. The issue that I want to bring up here is, I think, I'm done, thank you. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot. Is we all want the same thing. We all want better health care for our constituents, especially those who need it. We all want a top-notch hospital network for Tarrant County. We come from different angles, different perspective, right? I come from a different perspective, so is DT, okay? It is best that we listen to every insight. It is best that we listen to every concerns and do our best to validate those concerns and mitigate those concerns. To me, that's the best business practice. Instead of shutting it down, cutting it off, and things like that. I think the latter is a better approach to mitigate risk and provide a more sustainable organization. And I just want to make sure that all of you in this room and all of us understand that I or anybody else in this room or in this county wants the same thing. The key concern that I have is to make sure that all of us have the ability to voice our concern and to be listened to.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
What we will do now, we will begin to schedule, get with each of you to schedule the community outreach town hall meetings, and also work with JPS staff to develop those programs.
Chairman Emerson.
You scared me.
First of all, I would like to say thank you for the 5-0 unanimous vote. Number two, I just want to share with you and to Commissioner Wynn that the entire board supports and fully agrees with DT's concerns. And that's why we have even started our own process at board meetings of demonstrating what we're doing and what each department does in its area to show where productivity is increasing. We wouldn't dare step out and not have that concern to give the best product we can to JPS. I think you will see that. We have, since I've been chair, we've formed already a bond committee. There's a representative from each precinct on that bond committee. We've already started talking about putting together a full bond bond schedule of things to do to make sure all bases are covered. Rest assured, we have and have heard your concerns. I share with you as chairperson, no one is cut off. We hear and will take a proactive action to make sure that this is a successful bond program.
Thank you for your leadership.
And thank each one of you as members, because I know you commit a tremendous amount of time. And as you said, it's kind of a political appointment. We give you cookies, and that's about it from that standpoint. Now, I will make a note that the phone rang, and that the reason the phone rang was because Charlie's expecting twin grandsons, and he is on the way to the hospital to be there at the birth of his twin. I don't think he's going to catch him. I don't think James will let him anywhere in the room to catch him. But he's going to be there in the waiting room as any grandparent, proud grandparent would be. So, again, I really want to thank you all for the effort that you've put in, because I know this has been a 5-year-plus process. I really feel like y'all have got belt and suspenders both on this deal, and I'm looking forward to the public meetings, to the town hall meetings, because I think folks are going to be excited about what possibilities this brings, not only for additional patient care, but also for more efficient and effective use of the taxpayer dollars that we're
I think it's a tremendous team that they have put together to put this bond package together, so my congratulations to you for that.
I'd like to say that I've been in county government for 24 years, not quite as long as JD, but
29.
And all 24 of those years, we've been talking about the adjacencies at JPS Hospital. To have the opportunity to finally get that right so that we can give a higher quality of health care to the people of Tarrant County is just a golden opportunity. And to add to our ability to take care of those in our community with behavioral health issues is more than a lagniappe. It is a vital thing. So congratulations for a well thought out, well planned program. And I'm excited about the prospects for it.
And having spent about 3 weeks in your facility at one time in my life, I'm certainly glad to see that you're going to be able to use it.
And he was a paying patient.
Yes, I was a paying patient.
In a semi-private room?
No, I had a private room. I did have a private room.
Nobody else would go in there with me.
No, it's semi-private. I had Steve in it most of the time.
Was that Trinity Springs? I mean, if Steve was there, it had to be Trinity Springs.
You just violated
You
HIPAA.
start digging a hole, get rid of the shovel.
Thank you all very much. Mr. Manius, I believe we have one more item.
Yes, we do.
If they want to stay, they're welcome to stay. If they want to leave, they know where the door is.
Public meeting.
We're not asking anyone to leave.
Thank you for your time.
Members of court, a week ago to the administrator's section, item A2. This is action concerning the Strategic Transportation Enhancement Program. As you might recall, we have went out on RFPs, and we've had now, several weeks ago, we had presentations from the two highest ranked firms. And now we need to decide how and if we're going to move forward with this particular effort. I don't know if you have this, if you can pull it up, but I gave you a court communication, and what we're suggesting as staff is that the court make some determinations. And the determinations that we believe that are important, and the court obviously can make additional determinations, is that, and I've listed them as 3 bullet points. One is to determine if the court wants to move forward with the STEP program. And if you
One is
do,
what now?
to determine if the court wants to move forward with the STEP program. And the STEP stands for Strategic Transportation Enhancement Program. That's part of our strategic plan. The second one, if so, then determine what elements of within the RFP scope of services that the vendor should perform. And then once we do that, to authorize staff, which includes purchasing department and our office, to seek the best and final offer from the chosen vendor. Now, attached to your court communication is the general scope of professional services that were required, that were part of the RFP. Speaking with Jack Beecham, you can diminish the services that you want, but you can't expand the services that are in the scope. Basically, the scope of services, just think of it as the walls. You can keep the same scope of services. You can say, well, we want to do this one, but we don't want to do that one. But you can't create a task that is outside of those walls. So what I'm asking you to do is to have a discussion first and then give staff direction as it relates to this. You did hear the presentations, and I have the scoring sheets that we did when we originally scored them back in 2014, if you'd like to take a look at those from the original RFP, and simply give staff direction on this. So
I guess one of the, and I want to be sure I understand what you just said, because from my perspective, and especially after hearing this morning the presentation regarding the western side, and I think we've got a lot of that stuff also occurring over on the eastern side. In my mind, where I think we are right now is really looking at getting an inventory, setting our inventory of projects, prioritizing, and then being prepared to assist, whether it be municipalities, whether it be TxDOT, whether it be another county, through interlocal agreements in getting projects ready, shovel-ready, as it were, if funding is found and made available. And as I read through your 3 steps there, I don't see engineering in there, and I really don't feel like, I feel like that from a standpoint of, if we're talking about lobbying or doing things along that type of lines, that's something that we've got some folks, whether it be Mr. Mendez, whether it be Casey, Pipes and Corley, that can do a lot of that, and what we need is something to do the engineering part. And I don't think we can do engineering through the 3 steps that you laid out here.
one of the things on the RFP that was very specific, we actually included it, the exact wording, we're not looking for engineering services.
And so I guess what I'm saying is from what has occurred so far and where we are on our western subregion, what has occurred with regards to the whole issue of the funding and things that are going on along that lines, I would rather see us set this money aside for entering in local agreements with other counties and things along that lines, as opposed to stuff which I think is already being done, and we would just be duplicating an effort.
I'll make a motion that we not proceed with this plan.
I'll second the motion. Discussion.
Well, in my perspective, we are expecting our population to be increased by about 1 million. The transportation plan is done at the local level and at the regional level. And it is looked at by the RTC, and it is looked at by TxDOT. There are some enhancements and customizations that are needed to be done at the county level, at the Tarrant County level, to fit the needs of certain precincts and to fit the needs of certain particular area within the county. We can certainly continue to do what we have been doing, which is dependent upon the leadership of one or more than one members of the court. Or we can build a more systemic approach to the way we handle transportation and advanced transportation needs, much like we handle IT or much like we handle public health. Those areas are not so dependent upon the leadership of elected officials. That leadership is still necessary. But right now, transportation is really, we have to be very, very, very involved in that. Otherwise, we will not get what we need. And even if that happens, it takes a long time to get the funding, the environmental study, and things like that. It can take 20, 30 years to get a significant transportation project. I feel like it is very important that we build into Transportation Department of Tarrant County a mechanism in which we can automatically enhance and advance the needs for Tarrant County transportation without having to basically go back and forth and wait for the leadership of this court or some members of this court to do that. So I think the needs are real and the needs are very complex. If we do not take the step to beef up our transportation team, if we do not take the steps to be proactive, we will continue to be dependent upon the leadership of one or more than one members of the court. And frankly, transportation projects, 10, 20, 30 years, when those time come, none of us will be here. None of us will be here. So I'm asking the court to take a look at this issue, not from a political standpoint, but look at it from a more systemic approach to advance our transportation needs more systematically and more effectively without putting, for lack of better words, all the eggs in one basket, if you will. And that's the reason why I have been advocating for doing this. But I certainly understand the political dynamics of it, so.
I don't see the political dynamics. I think that this is just something that needs to be done. I thought it needed to be done for years, and I think we need to move forward.
Call the question.
Please vote. Motion passes 3-2.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other business at this time?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
We are adjourned.